American Prospect magazine back in March of this year, just 8-9 weeks ago, published an article on their website, prospect.org, titled An Economic Bill of Rights for the 21st Century. It is by Mark Paul, William Darity Jr., and Derek Hamilton. And they pointed out that back in 1944, in Franklin Roosevelt's State of the Union address, he talked about the basic needs of Americans that should be filled as rights rather than simply privileges. He starts out by pointing out that if you are poor, that is to say necessitous, if you're hungry, if you're homeless, if you're jobless, if you don't have access to medicine or education, that you are not really free. Now, we've seen Republicans and conservatives redefine freedom vigorously, aggressively, ever since the Reagan era, where they say freedom is the ability to spend money as you wish. Freedom is the ability to prevent other people from spending money as they wish if you don't like them. So freedom is in the conservatives' mind, it's the ability to have a lot of cash and do whatever the hell you want with it, unless you happen to be black and you want to eat at that lunch counter that's owned by another person who says, no, my freedom is to keep you out of here. Or my freedom is not to make a wedding cake for gay people or whatever. This is how freedom has been redefined by conservatives. But we all know, deep down in our gut, that freedom actually means not being in fear. Being able to act with agency, being able to conduct yourself in a rational way, being able to go through life without fear, not being necessitous. So FDR laid out his basic rights, and that was to a job, to food and clothing, to a decent home, to good health, that is, free health care, to a protection against the problems of old age, that was Social Security, and the right to a good education. In fact, here's Franklin Roosevelt laying it out, and then I'm going to get into where Paul, Darity, and Hamilton said, we need to go for the 21st century, we need to add a few things to this equation, and then I'd like to ask you what you would like to add to this list. So let's start out with about a minute and a half here of Franklin Roosevelt.
True individual freedom cannot exist without economic security and independence. Necessitous men are not free men. People who are hungry, people who are out of a job, are the stuff of which dictatorships are made. In our day, these economic truths have become accepted as self-evident. We have accepted, so to speak, a second Bill of Rights, under which a new basis of security and prosperity can be established for all, regardless of station or race or creed. Among these are the right to a useful and remunerative job in the industry.
There you go, the right to a job, number one. Pretty important stuff. Number two?
For shops, or farms, or mines of the nation. The right to earn enough to provide adequate food and clothing and recreation.
Number two, food, clothing, and recreation. Number three?
The right of every businessman, large and small, to trade in an atmosphere of freedom from unfair competition and domination.
Oh, he wants to roll back Reagan's rollback of the Sherman Act and say, hey, wait a minute, we're going to do something about these anti-competitive giants.
By monopolies at home or abroad. The right of every family to a decent home.
Housing.
The right to adequate medical care.
Free education.
The opportunity
free medicine.
to achieve and enjoy good health. The right to adequate protection from the economic fears of old age and sickness and accident.
Social Security and Medicare.
Finally, the right to a good education.
And the right to a good education. Now, back in the 1940s, most Americans believed those were entirely reasonable things. The GI Bill was passed enthusiastically, sent millions of young people returning from World War II, men and women, mostly men, mostly white men, but sent millions of them off to college, helped them buy homes, all these things. Well, this article in the Prospect is suggesting we should add a few things. First of all, I would say we need to go back to this list. I mean, you go back, I quoted this at some length in my book, The Crash of 2016, but if you go back into the 1930s and read the New York Times, you find these amazing articles about how members of Congress right across the board, including Republicans, were buried in mail and phone calls and visitors from people saying, give FDR whatever he wants. We support Social Security. We support the WPA. We support the CCC. We support the New Deal. Give FDR the ability to take us out of this hole that Coolidge and Hoover, the Republicans, dug us into, and Harding as well, the three Republicans who preceded him. All uber conservative Reaganomic types. And the two that they suggest are the right to sound banking and financial services, which Mick Mulvaney is trying to destroy right now. This is something that Elizabeth Warren invented, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, saying, hey, you know, we've got a Consumer Protection Bureau that if your toaster blows up, can go after your toaster manufacturer. Or if your refrigerator explodes, they can go after the refrigerator manufacturer. But if your mortgage blows up, you have no recourse. How is that good? So, you know, we created the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and of course the Republicans want to destroy it because, hey, it protects consumers. To hell with the consumers is kind of the semi-official Republican mantra. So what they're saying is we need to add in the right to sound banking and financial services. The fiduciary rule, for example, that says that if you hire a financial advisor to invest your money or to recommend how to invest your money, and they give you a recommendation that is going to benefit them more than it benefits you because they're recommending that you put your money in a fund that provides them with a nice kickback or commission, that they have to disclose that to you. You know, right now they don't have to disclose that. The right to a safe and clean environment. Now, we thought we got this in the 1970s when Richard Nixon signed the EPA into law with the support of, you know, all the Democrats and quite a few Republicans. The Cuyahoga River had caught on fire. You couldn't, as you flew into Los Angeles, it was hard to see where you were going because the haze was off. I flew a small plane into Los Angeles in 1971. Louise and I flew, or 72, whatever year it was, maybe 73. We flew across the country from Lansing, Michigan to Los Angeles in a little Cherokee Arrow, Tango 4175, or Cherokee 4175 Tango was the number. And I remember approaching Los Angeles and seeing just this giant orange dome around the city. And as we flew into it, as we left the clear air and we flew into it to come into I forget which airport we flew into in LA, but it was one of the smaller ones. As we flew into it, you could smell it. The smell of the air in the plane changed. That's no longer there. You fly into Los Angeles now, there's no schmutz, you know, there's no smog. We got a clean environment, relatively speaking, and now the Republicans, funded by mostly petro-billionaires, want to undo that. So let's make that a right. Let's put that into law. And then the third one that they're suggesting is the right to a meaningful endowment of resources as a birthright. Now, the right to resources as a birthright, you know, has a whole lot of discussion about what exactly does this mean. But what they're saying is the right to seed capital to build a lifetime of asset economic security. And what they're saying is that the top 1% of Americans hold 42% of all wealth. The top 1/10 of 1% own 22% of all wealth. And the legacy of chattel slavery, where black people were literally a form of wealth for whites, and the discrimination encouraged and perpetuated through public policies have left black families with minimal wealth. And, you know, conventional explanations of wealth disparities relying on rhetoric around the dysfunctional behavior of blacks and their lack of education or financial literacy don't hold up. This is structural stuff. So they say, given the importance of wealth in determining life outcomes, public intervention is needed to address unjustly created distributions. One such solution, baby bonds, would seed every American at birth with an initial endowment to be held in trust until adulthood. The account would be universal, through which every newborn would receive an account starting at around $500 for those born into the most affluent families, and progressively rising to $50,000 for children born into families with minimal wealth. This, by the way, is a program that was first proposed in a book called Agrarian Justice by Thomas Paine. In Agrarian Justice in the 1790s, Thomas Paine suggested that every American at birth should be given an endowment which would grow, which would be invested and would grow throughout their childhood. And when they reached the age of adulthood, that money would become theirs. So we all start out with I've got my nut right here. We all start out with a starting point. So I think these are all great suggestions, and I think that these things should be put into law as rights. Suggestions, thoughts, disagreements? Give me a shout.